Presented by the Complex Trauma Training Center. I'm your host, Emily Ruth, and I'm so glad you've joined us today. Licensed mental health professionals, we warmly invite you to join our Summer 2026 NARM Therapist Training, a hybrid online or in-person immersion into the transformative power of the neuroaffective relational model. This advanced clinical training is designed specifically for those seeking to deepen their expertise in healing complex trauma while offering the flexibility of online learning combined with the depth of in-person experiential work. From January to August 2026, you will be part of a supportive learning community that meets both virtually or in person in Salt Lake City, integrating mindfulness and clinical expertise. Through 4 comprehensive modules, you'll gain specialized trauma-informed knowledge and skills to confidently and compassionately address the impact of adverse childhood experiences and complex trauma. Together, we'll explore how to support the resolution of attachment, developmental, relational, cultural, and intergenerational trauma using a neurobiologically informed approach that promotes post-traumatic growth. Embodying both professional and personal growth, you'll become a catalyst for transformation in your practice and community. Enrollment is now open for licensed psychotherapists, counselors, social workers, psychologists, and other mental health professionals, as well as graduate trainees and interns working toward licensure. Visit ComplexTraumaTrainingCenter.com to learn more and secure your spot in this hybrid online and in-person training experience in Salt Lake City, Utah. And now for our interview. Sarah Champie is a licensed trauma therapist based in California who specializes in supporting individuals and families navigating hereditary cancer, genetic testing, and preventative or reconstructive surgeries. Her work integrates trauma-informed, somatic, and relational approaches to help clients reconnect with their bodies and make meaning through uncertainty. She is the creator and host of the podcast Walking the Genetic Line, which explores the human experience of living with hereditary cancer risk. Sarah's practice bridges the medical and emotional worlds, offering a space for healing, agency, and intergenerational resilience. Please enjoy this conversation with Sarah Champie. All right. I am sitting here with Sarah Champie. Sarah, welcome to Transforming Trauma.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this conversation, and yeah, it's going to be a good one. So as we do, I'd love to begin just by connecting with you and asking, what would you like our listeners to come away with from our conversation today?
Today, I would love if listeners were able to connect with their own sense of agency, and specifically regarding any medical urgency or decision-making that may be up in their lives. I really see that through these conversations that I've been having, that these are portal moments where we get the chance to reevaluate and reconnect with our priorities and what we want for ourselves. Sometimes our medical journeys are the journeys that bring that back to the front. So I hope that, listeners can get a chance to see that there's still agency here.
Mm-hmm. That's so beautiful. And I'm noticing I'm already feeling touched because I've had my own medical journey, and I imagine everyone who's listening has either had their own, medical things that have come up, or someone that they love has been through something. So I'm really looking forward to digging into this with you. So can you tell us first where in the world you are and a little bit about the work you're doing, who you're working with?
Yeah, so I live in the North Bay area, in Sebastopol, and I've been in private practice here since I started the NARM training in 2019, coincided with when I opened my private practice. And over the last several years, my practice has really started to shift and focus on people navigating genetic risk and cancer, and just serving this community that's going through so many unasked for choices and so many kind of invasive treatments and procedures has been incredibly profound and touching to me. I started working with this community because I too am a BRCA1 carrier. And I think that on my peer group of therapists and colleagues in this community have been pretty open about that. And so there was like this spider web network of connection that started to form around me, like, oh, Sarah also has a genetic mutation. Like, maybe you guys should connect. Maybe it'd be nice to talk to each other. And it really started to grow organically. And I've just found so much personal healing as well as professional just passion and inspiration, and looking at this experience as more than a medical experience. The medical community really holds this topic right now. And I just feel like there needs to be a much broader conversation about the emotional and relational impacts of having a genetic mutation and navigating hereditary cancer in your family system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. So you're working with that population. Can you say a little bit more about how you came to that? Because I know I'm hearing you say you've had your own journey, but yeah, what led you to want to work with folks who are also navigating that?
Yeah. Well, my whole career, like, how does anyone become a therapist? My whole career was shaped by my early childhood and my experiences of loss and trauma, and resilience and love and, all of that. But specifically, my mom was diagnosed with ovarian cancer when I was 7 years old. And then we went through her treatment journey for 3 years, and she passed away when I was 10. And I share just a couple aspects of my experience pretty publicly, because I do think that speaking to the hereditary cancer community, just like any minority community or kind of subculture, it's so powerful to know that the person sitting with you really understands and holds a membership in that environment. And so, yeah, so I have been very open with my personal history of hereditary cancer, and also because it just shaped who I am and who I am as a provider and as a therapist. And so going through that was deeply impactful, that loss. And when I graduated from my master's degree and started practicing social work, I was in the foster care and probation systems. And it was very behaviorally focused. And I wasn't resonating with it after time. I knew that I didn't want to be counting tantrums and giving sticker stars to children for good behavior. It was something really off for me. And I stepped back, and I actually realized at that point in my life that I wanted to completely shift settings, and I started working in hospice care. And I knew that this had to do with, circling back to learn, explore, integrate some aspect of losing my own mom as a child. So I worked in hospice care for about 4 years before opening my practice. And just, I feel like what I'm telling you is these are all the stepping stones that kind of led me to my relationship with my practice, with working with people with really intense, sometimes terminal, definitely life-changing medical diagnoses, and how it impacts our relationship to living so deeply when we're at that intersection of helplessness and agency, right? Like when you have a medical diagnosis enter the room that's going to change the shape of your life, that is that moment, right? Of like, what are we surrendering to? And then where do I still have choice here? And having those conversations over and over with people with terminal diagnoses really impacted my soul, impacted me as a human being, and how I walk in my own life and how I work with my patients, or now my clients in private practice. So I hope that I'm kind of answering maybe the narrative story of what brought me here. But I feel like people started coming into my private practice really through a natural network, right? So really through people saying, "Oh, you're seeking therapy and you have a genetic mutation." Sarah Champie actually has a genetic mutation, and I know that about her. And you guys, maybe you should consult with her. And then that was kind of how it started in my practice. Was I was just like, wow, this is so touching to work with people in this community and giving me a sense of like, wow, I've been holding so much in this, and like this exploration is so much more rich than I have been supported to explore through the medical setting. And we can kind of get into that. Like, I really see a gap in care here.
Yeah. I'd love to hear more about that. So let's put a pin in that. I want to circle back to the piece, because you said you started your private practice right around the same time you got into the NARM training. Can you speak to that a little bit? Because that sounds interesting.
Yeah. So I was at hospice and, having a lot of really profound and beautiful relationships, but still through a medical lens, right? Like still as a clinical social worker through, their Medicare or through like with a team of doctors. And I was just really longing to have conversations, like a therapeutic clinical setting where the people that I was working with actively wanted to explore. It's such a different contract when you are a social worker going into someone's home. They have an illness, they haven't asked for emotional support, they're not wanting therapy, you're offering resources, and do you have everything you need? And I found this part of my heart that was really longing to have the more like spiritual, depthful, clinical conversations. And taking the NARM training gave me the scaffolding and the confidence that I needed to know how to hold a session. So I would say that my practice is entirely based on NARM. After staying connected to the NARM community for the last 6 years and going on to complete the master's level certification, and having ongoing clinical consultation in the NARM community, I really see myself as a NARM therapist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that just warms my heart. I feel like, I don't know about your grad program, but I feel like mine, while there was a lot of good there, it didn't also prepare me to have these depthful conversations that you're speaking to. And so I don't know that there's a question in that, but just kind of like knowing that you wanted that, even if you didn't receive that necessarily in training, but then in this context of the hospice work, and knowing I still want to go deeper. And these clients that's not necessarily why I'm showing up here, why we're coming together. And so, I don't know if that's a chicken or the egg sort of conversation of like if you left private practice first, or if you got into the NARM training and realized that wasn't the environment that was going to support that kind of work?
No, it was the other way around. Clear. It was, I met Brad through a personal connection, because we're both from the North Bay area. He's a little bit farther north than I am, but we have some personal shared community. And so I met him that way, and then took a course by him, like a one-off weekend course down here in Sebastopol, and then decided to do the NARM. At that time, I don't remember if it was just NARM level 1. I think now it would be the NARM basics training or something. Yeah, so it was through the NARM training that I actually got to work with the parts of me that felt so, like, we use shorthand of like imposter syndrome, but whatever pressuring was taking place inside of me, that I needed to be an expert and excellent and know everything and be perfect as a therapist. Through my first exposure to the NARM modality, I got to work with those ways that I was relating to myself and really experience my own disidentification, that melting to a greater awareness and complexity that, like, of course I'm never going to know everything. And of course I'm going to get stuck. And look, I have this community that I can turn to. I have layers of mentorship here. Look how this learning never ends. And rather than that being a sign of some internal failure that I'm still learning, like all this excitement came forward and all this life energy of like, oh my gosh, I've chosen the career where the learning never ends. What? Like, this is so great. So yeah, really radical shifts in the ways that I was relating to myself in the process of moving into private practice, of calling myself a therapist instead of a social worker. It really resonated. I'm not sure if you're an MFT, but as an LCSW, we have a broader way of getting our clinical hours. So specifically for me, I had to really overcome this idea that I didn't have years of training as a therapist, like sitting individually in a room, looking at each other, and yeah, but really, like I said, it came down to the ways that I was pressuring myself to know everything. And so it was so beautiful to get some freedom from that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. I've been curious. We've never been in this situation where I felt like I could just ask that question. So I'm glad you could share with us that piece of it. So to come back to the work, tell me a little bit more about this, like tracking the depthful piece and anything you want to say about that.
Could you give me a little more frame tracking?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know you and I, before we pressed record, I can just say, we were talking a little bit about there's some things that you've been tracking and in like learning more about NARM and going deeper with it, how that's intersecting with this population that you're working with. Can you share with us any of how you've come to that, or as you're continuing to, as that's unfolding, as you're discovering? I just want to hear anything you want to share there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think I want to start maybe by providing just a little education or just like background on the experience of people that are navigating being diagnosed with a genetic mutation. I mean, some of our listeners likely know someone in their lives who have gone through this or heard of someone. I know that there's like also some really famous kind of media examples, Angelina Jolie and different actors or actresses that have ultimately shared that they have genetic mutations and the choices they made around their relationship to risk and that. But essentially, there's two pathways that people get diagnosed with a genetic mutation that are the most common right now. It's through a process of either someone in your family has a cancer that's known to be associated with hereditary risk, or you yourself have been diagnosed with cancer, and then the genetic testing comes through part of your treatment plan. And we can talk more about that. But so no matter what, when you get your genetic testing results, you're already in a moment of needing to hold the complexity of your own lived experience, this positive gene mutation living in your body, with some other story of someone in your life, potentially, or a family member and their cancer experience. So it's deeply impacted by the amount of medical trauma or emotional content that's happening in your life at that time. And when I say it's deeply, what I mean by that is your emotional response to it, like how it is for you to hold the fact that you carry a genetic mutation is impacted by the context of who in your family has had cancer and what their treatment experience was, if it was a fatal cancer, right? Like, so some people get their genetic testing results and they have no history of cancer. Maybe if it's through their own cancer diagnosis, it's early in the cancer process, and there can be a lot of like, okay, this is just a part of my experience, and like I'm going to trot through this. Kind of might feel a little bit scary or complicated, but like there's a lot of resilience, or there's a lot of capacity to just kind of like have faith or trust in all the treatment options available to you. And for other people, and I'll, again, reference like for myself as someone who lost my mom so young, finding out I had a genetic mutation was terrifying. Terrifying. because all I had to associate with that was the fact that my mom had died when I was 10 years old and she was 46, right? And so, as I think Larry is the one I heard talking about this several years ago, but he talks about projective memory, right? And so, in that moment, we have an uncertainty living in our body. I carry this genetic mutation. I am healthy right now, but I'm now in this moment, like the volume is getting turned up so high about what will happen to me and how safe I am living in this body. And when we've been through a trauma, the projective memory is literally a voice is like, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. I have to do something like, and it can be a visceral experience that's a lot like I already have cancer. And then there's a lot of rational thoughts usually that take place, right? Like, well, you don't have cancer now, it's not that bad, and da da da. Like, so I guess I just really wanted to speak to for folks that may not have this experience directly in their lives, just give a little context to why I am thinking and speaking about this through a trauma-informed lens. Because this is the emotional experience, right? We have the grief, sometimes traumatic grief of someone in our life that has had cancer or has even died from cancer. And so that gets brought to the fore. And then on top of that, you're immediately sucked into a funnel of medical decision making. And there are so many layers of that, right? Like there's your prophylactic surgical options if you want to explore cutting off body parts or, having preventative double mastectomy, hysterectomy if you're in the BRCA community. I know there's a lot of different genetic mutation carriers. I don't want to only speak to the BRCA community, but I do have the most information about that genetic mutation because that's where a lot of my own medical education came through as a patient. So I don't want to go off too much on a tangent, but there's a lot of genetic mutations now that we know about. Really common ones, ATM, Lynch syndrome, CHEK2, BARD1, and there's about 20 more that we know about. As genetic testing gets more and more refined, more and more people are being diagnosed with genetic mutations. So 20 years ago, this wasn't much of a conversation. Now it's like, it's happening all around us. I'll pause there for a second. I feel like maybe I'm on a tangent.
No, this is I'm feeling it. So I fall in one of those categories, and having my own experience. I mean, I'm just thinking about if I had, and I've worked with a therapist, since kind of having some of the bigger pieces rise up for me in my life when they were really alive. But if I had had a therapist to work through in real time, I'm just holding how rich that is, how important that is, and just feeling a lot of gratitude for you and the work that you're doing, and that folks are, have the opportunity to work with someone in real time while they're navigating all of these choices. Because I felt really lost. Like you said, there's choices on the table. It's like I was in sort of this very cognitive place of like, okay, I need to make these choices. But the emotional support, that was not available to me. I wasn't aware. I'm sure that it was, but I wasn't aware of what the emotional support was available. So I'm just appreciating what you're naming.
Yeah. Well, and I think that that's what's so fascinating to me because, going back to all the layers of decision making, if you're in childbearing years, you're suddenly having to think about, your relationship to family planning and your emotional response to the idea of passing this gene down to your children. Or do you want to have IVF? Can you afford IVF? What does IVF even look like for your family? If you've already had children, there's often a lot of guilt, or hopefully we can slow that down and really bring more complexity to that. But around the possibility that you have already passed it down to your children, there's all sorts of layers of medical advocacy that have to take place that bring up power and control with experts in those doctors' relationship to risk. Like it's you're suddenly stepping into a vortex of a lot of really intense conversations and navigation and just research, like, am I supposed to be the expert on this, or should I just take what this doctor tells to me? Like, I'm on Google, I'm on ChatGPT, like I'm getting overwhelmed. And to your point around the emotional support, I think in 10 years, right? I got my own genetic testing when I was about 30 years old. And in 10 years, I was offered one breast cancer cafe. This was the only emotional support I was offered. Somewhere in there, I think maybe when I was first exploring preventative surgeries, a mastectomy specifically, I was offered like a breast cancer cafe that had a nurse practitioner and a social worker. And it was like a drop-in, one-off kind of experience to get some resources. And that being said, there are some amazing national resources, national organizations that are offering a lot of information and doing their best to offer emotional support, like Charette and Force Hereditary Cancer Facing Our Risk is the name of a national organization that has amazing education and a series. There's every month, I believe, there's a drop-in group. So there are these like big drop-in groups where you can go to connect. The other piece that we have is like social media. So there's these Facebook groups and there's like Reddit threads, and there's thousands of people in them. Like the BRCA 1 and 2 support group that I'm a part of, I think it has like 9 or 10,000 members in it. And people are writing on there. They're writing like, I can't sleep. Like all I do is cry. Like I've passed this down to, I'm pregnant, and just calling out for connection, to not feel so alone with this experience of our genes. It's kind of like, I'm pausing because I'm like, it's like living with the mystery on such a cellular level, right? It's like so visceral. That's why it really touches identity. There's a before and after. There's like, before I knew I had a genetic mutation, and then after I found out I had a genetic mutation. And for some of us, it's a real threshold moment of identity in which our relationship to our lives is changed by that experience. And so the fact that there's not more specialized mental health or therapeutic support for this community, the farther I've gotten into it and really validated my own experience and talked with other clients and people in this community, to me is quite mind-boggling at this point. I'm like, this needs to be a huge conversation because genetic testing is only going to increase. I've been talking with more and more genetic counselors, and there's actually conversations, granted they're from more the industry side, but about doing genetic panels on all babies birthed in hospitals, complete genetic panels, and then somehow guarding that information throughout our lives, and then at sensitive time points as we age, like revealing genetic identity, genetic mutation information when pertinent medical decision making needs to be made, which is mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, that strikes something for me, because for me, a lot of my symptoms and things that were coming up, it was unknown to me because I hadn't been tested. And I didn't have anyone in my family that we had connected dots to figure out what was happening. So there's like a particular kind of grief that happened for me, discovering and realizing, oh, there's all these years and all these things that I've dealt with that I didn't understand what was happening. And now I know, and I have all these choices and I feel a little bit overwhelmed. But like, I'm still grieving so much of what's happened. I don't know if that makes sense, but I'm just, this that you're naming of like, now there's so many more resources and potentially more choices. Like there's more things on the table that we can do, but also that can feel overwhelming, and having the emotional support to help someone navigate that is just invaluable. It's just priceless.
Yeah. I love that you just spoke to that perspective, right? Because there is no one relationship to this. And I think that what you're speaking to around the longing to have known, right? And this comes up so much when we're dealing with, anytime we're dealing with any aspect of mortality, to be honest, like when mortality enters the room, or our relationship to our life as finite, as like the deep knowing that this won't last forever, and that I'm in a process of surrender to the mystery of life, surrender of control, and also I am co-creating with that. There's a grief and a reconciling, right? A reconciling what was. And so just to hear you willing to share that you have walked a part of that path is so meaningful to me.
And I'm feeling emotional. I can name this. I'm a little more comfortable these days with, showing this part. But there's layers, and there's like life milestones, at least for me in my experience, where I feel like I can process it and it feels complete in a season of life. And then I move into a new season of life and it impacts me in a different way. That's what this is. It's impacting me in a different way as I'm in a new season of life. And again, just knowing that there's support for that specifically, and that you're doing this work. So that's part of why I've been so excited to have this conversation, because it touches me personally. And I just think there's probably not a person on the planet that doesn't have either a lived experience of that or someone that they love and care about that is navigating something. I just think we're finding it's so much more prevalent than we might have imagined 5-10 years ago.
Absolutely. And I want to just get in here one layer further, which is that I feel a level of concern or just like a desire to make more space, because something that has happened in the genetic testing community is that we've grabbed onto empowerment and we've grabbed onto choice, and and there's this like, everyone needs testing. Everyone needs and you should get tested, and information is power. And I do think that we can get there. I do think that exists immediately for some people. And also, I feel a level of concern about the ways that stories of empowerment and strength, specifically in the cancer community, cancer warriors, battling cancer, like rising empowered, like here it can kind of turn into like an ABC. I use ABC as like a sign of really focusing on outcomes, like a simple narrative in which we just go like step forward. And so a lot of times the public facing aspect of these conversations is a conversation of empowerment. I got tested. I had my mastectomy. Now I'm safe. I had my hysterectomy. I beat cancer. And what I don't mean to like pull that down or make that problematic of its own, because that part of the experience is real and beautiful. However, I think part of the way I see my work as a therapist, and specifically through the individual and group support that I offer, it's like there's so many pieces of the puzzle that need to be honored if we're really going to stand there in a holistic story, right? Like, I'm so concerned about that being a fracturing of our psyche, in which we only allow empowerment, we only allow the agency and choice that we were given by testing. Because if it's a fracturing of the psyche, then all of the grief and all of the helplessness and all of the rage and all of the opportunity for deep self-attunement and self-referencing that allows the complexity of, this is like the complexity of being a human being with technological advances that our animal hearts, our animal bodies have no idea how to relate with. What do you mean I carry a genetic mutation that puts me at a high risk of cancer? What do you mean my recurrence rate is statistically higher? How the heck do I walk through the rest of my life knowing that? And I think that my hope, maybe we're getting back to the intention of this work or of this podcast, my hope is that we can hold our agency and the portal, the opening of this moment, with so much depth and so much honoring of all the nuance of what it means to try and wrestle with this. Because the opportunity to override ourselves and to just rush through medical decisions and just rush to safety is so high here at perceived safety. I want to be careful about that word. And I sit with a lot of genetic mutation carriers who maybe like had preventative surgeries in their 20s or 30s, and now they're not getting to breastfeed their children. And I'm never going to say that was the wrong decision, but I am going to stand in the complexity of that grief, right? Like, I saved my life and now I get to be really sad about it. And maybe looking back, I could have feelings that I wish I would have waited. I'll never know if I would have been safe if I did. Like, can we just have someone to stand with us there in that moment with all of it being true at the same time? Because I don't see that very often.
Absolutely. Oh, that really speaks to me personally. This piece of like, there's so much unknown, and you can't know if we had made one choice earlier or later or whatever. We just can't know how things might have turned out. And there's often grief in that. And to sort of reduce it and put it in this box of the empowerment piece, it's like that doesn't honor the whole, like you said, the complexity. We're not looking at it holistically in that way. And so I'm hearing you say that's part of what you support your clients with.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that's what's so beautiful about the NARM model and the way that it's changed my life is like to be able to stand with neutrality, or at least spaciousness, to be with all these different parts of our experience, and to realize that that truly is a widening window of tolerance. To me, yeah, I mean, I just think that when our medical realities crash into our developmental trauma, it's like suddenly our relationship to risk is all informed by how safe we did or didn't feel as a child or earlier in our lives or through other medical experiences. And so we can actually be flooded, right? And then desperately trying to get back inside our window by choosing options, the most dramatic or the most preventative or the most physically safe, to try and get to this place of safety, which is never really going to exist, right? Like, we're always in a process of helplessness and surrender to the universe and to mystery in our bodies and all the environment. And so I just, it breaks my heart and really fuels my like clinical passion to hope that we can find someone to sit with us in that space, so that the process, no matter what we choose, is a process of self-connection, right? Rather than disconnection, rather than override, rather than a strategy to try and get back inside our window.
What you're saying, it's bringing something up for me. Let me think if I can articulate the question that maybe I'm holding. I haven't even fully thought this through, but I'm thinking about how, so I have kind of a medical history here that we're talking about, or that I'm talking about sort of vaguely. And I know of others who have maybe similar or even the same piece to their medical story. And I'm thinking about how I might hold it very differently than someone else who, even from the outside, it might look like their life experience looks very similar. They may have some similar themes in their story, but we might hold it very, very differently. And I'm imagining when you're working with clients, that might be something that comes up too. Of course, as NARM therapists, we know that like even the same sort of, from a bird's eye view or distance might look like, oh, there's some similar things to these stories, but these clients are holding it very differently. And I'm wondering if you can speak to that from a NARM lens, why that is, or what you do with that.
Absolutely. It's been incredibly helpful for me to use the survival styles as part of the map and framework to understand, like, what are the dynamics that are really surfacing here through this portal of these genetic testing results. And I really mean the word portal, because again, getting a cancer diagnosis, getting genetic testing results, it's like a flood moment, right? You're suddenly, you've stepped into a new landscape of reality. And there are our ways of relating to the world are still deeply present in that new reality. So some of the language that I hear from some clients is this, I'm disconnected, I'm numb, I can't feel anything. I keep telling everyone I'm fine, but I actually don't know how I am, right? And so I really relate that to the connection survival style, right? Because being in connection with whatever is going on in that moment is so flooding or just intolerable that we can go to a spiritualizing place. We can go to intellectual. I'm doing tons of research. Like, how am I emotionally? I'm fine, but like I am up at 3 a.m. on Reddit threads on like medical documentation, research papers. Like, I'm going to become an expert in this in the next 3 weeks because that's how I'm going to manage how flooding this is. I also see people that are kind of in the attunement category who are afraid of being a burden. This can be incredibly time burden, financial burden, emotional support burden, right? And folks in this category or theme, they really can't hear their own needs because they experience so much pressure from the expectations around them in the family system. So the attunement kind of theme is really it's that next layer, right? What even if I had needs here, how could I even articulate them to myself? We can look through the trust theme. Like, we have people that would do anything to not feel vulnerable in front of their family members, right? Like, I will support team. No, I don't need a support team, right? These folks are not often in my practice, but I do think about and see, like, if you are carrying a lot of responsibility and leadership at work in which you have had to hold like teams together, or even if you carry a lot of responsibility and leadership in your family, there can be trust themes there, right? Because to actually show that you are vulnerable and going through something is terrifying. And you might have a lot of ideas that if I do, it will be seen as a sign of weakness, and my career will disappear. My success is based on the fact that I have strength and love sexuality. But basically in autonomy, the things that I see are that people carry an incredible amount of a hidden life, right? There's like an aspect that they're maybe going along with the plan or doing what their partner is wanting them to do, but inside they're totally wrestling with it. Or maybe substance abuse has re-entered the picture, or maybe there's other aspects of like a form of feeling like they have to do the safest thing, and there's no space for them to even talk about, well, what if I wanted to just live with surveillance for a while? What if I didn't want to do anything for a while? What if I wanted to try and work with a naturopathic landscape, right? To kind of be cancer prevention through lifestyle and but maybe that doesn't feel allowed to talk about at all, right? And there can be a lot of shame and kind of guarding of an inner world. And then love sexuality, I think mostly comes up for me around, because this is so much about our bodies, right? And the reconstructive process, this is a whole other conversation. The reconstructive process for people who have breasts and want to keep them is fascinating from a feminist and gender, expansive perspective. There are so many dynamics that come up around rebuilding breasts, or the choice to keep breasts, or the choice to remove breasts, and how that ripples through social relationships. And so as I wanted to kind of give that little map, because sometimes you're moving into these conversations and landscapes, and having that framework has been so supportive to really understand how these medical choices and decisions are directly connected to the ways that we learn to survive as a child, right? And to the ways that we found our value as a child, and our love and our connection. And so this amazing opportunity to finally get free, to finally explore these pressures and themes and the ways we relate to ourselves, so that maybe this is a process of liberation that was never available to us earlier in our life.
Gosh, there's so much that's coming up for me right now that I'm like wanting to ask and explore, and I'm also mindful of the time. But two things specifically that I'm holding that I sort of want to name is first this piece around what it means to, to have a kind of relationship to our body, and specifically for those who have breasts and want to keep them, or whatever that choice is. I'm thinking of like what happened in the media when Angelina Jolie made that decision for herself, and like how there were so many opinions. And, obviously a celebrity gets to choose how much they engage or not engage, or read or not read about what the public, but for anyone else, in my little life here with the people around me, there are going to be people who have opinions about whatever decision we're making. And so I'm just thinking about how working with you or a therapist that has this kind of lens of like how supportive that can be to like stand in our own, space around it, make those choices. And I don't know, I guess there's a sort of bravery that I'm holding, at least, that it's brave to make this decision to work with someone around all of these pieces and sort of, I don't want to say shut out anyone else's opinions, because we can, hold loved ones, I guess, with what their thoughts are or whatever, but to really do what we know is right for us and our bodies, like, that feels so brave, and it feels political sometimes, I think, for people. Like, I don't know. There's a lot there. But this piece around medical professionals, like how there needs to be so much more education there about this emotional piece. Like, okay, Sarah, can you do some consults with some plastic surgeons around, but I don't know. It's like, this is what you're kind of helping uncover, I think, is that there's so much here that we all need to educate ourselves around, because that choice may not be right here in the moment for me right now, but I don't know, 5 years down the road, there may be another layer of choices to be had or to be made. And I hope that those who are around me in my circle of support are also having some education around these pieces. So can you speak to the medical side and what, say there's a doctor who's listening to this, because there's great doctors out there who are interested in trauma and supporting their patients in a certain kind of way. So yeah, can you speak to that a little bit? I don't even know if that's a question.
It's absolutely a question. And we need like a whole other hour, because I just feel this like fire of like advocacy and passion in my own heart right now. The first thing I want to say is that there are so many doctors in this space that are amazing advocates and amazingly trauma informed. And I'm so grateful. And nor do I think we should expect doctors to have all the medical training of a psychotherapist, right? Like, come on, they are holding so much and in such a position of pressure from the medical system and bureaucracies that doctors are operating within. However, I mean, we didn't even get into on this podcast. I feel like I really focused on, breast options for some reason. We didn't even get on to surgical menopause and the impacts and what we know about menopause on bodies, early menopause, and HRT, right? Like this whole huge conversation, the black box removal in November of 2025. Finally, we have the label off of estrogen. We know it's not like a deeply dangerous, for the last 25 years, like labeled as deeply dangerous, highest level of warning. So now we have providers changing all the ways that they educate patients, talk to patients around menopause. It's part of this whole menopause revolution that's taking place right now, which is just so inspiring. From like, if I really to stay in my lane around the emotional and relational impacts of this, I think that what's happening is doctors have their own relationship to risk. They have their own information or lack thereof. And there needs to be an incredibly high level of personal responsibility and accountability to how they are responding to these diagnoses when they're talking to patients. So if you get diagnosed with a genetic mutation from your primary care provider, that is not the person who should be guiding your care. You need to seek out a specialized person's care, either at a clinic or center that manages genetic mutation people regularly, or, seek someone who's in private practice and helping people really go through menopause and go through this decision-making, high-risk cancer decision-making process as their primary focus, because otherwise you're going to deal with somebody who feels that you're an outlier and is scared of your experience, and then you're going to be navigating your provider's fear in addition to your own overwhelm. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay, so seek specialized support. Number one.
Yeah.
And I think for doctors to know that a referral to mental health is not optional. A referral to mental health at this time, it's not like what happens for so long in menopause is oh, you're not sleeping well and you're having trouble in your marriage and you're feeling a little foggy. I think you might be depressed. Go see a therapist, right? We're not doing that anymore. Therapy is a part of this model of support for people moving through these incredible thresholds of life. Again, I could just talk about that for about 2 hours, so I think I'll stop right there.
Mental, emotional health is health. And so anyone who's working in that space, any doctors, especially in this space of dealing with a genetic mutation or variation of some kind, that needs to be a given that the patient has this kind of support, this emotional support. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, Sarah, yes, we could talk, I feel like, for hours more. And hopefully you and I can do lunch sometime and I can ask some more questions that are, but I just am so appreciative of the work that you're doing and how you're sharing with us, how you're holding this NARM lens. And I know that there's even more around that you're doing, more of the NARM pieces that you're holding that we obviously didn't get to. But for those who are curious in the work that you're doing, and you've got a presence online and such, so can you share? Because I also, if I can just shout out, you have a podcast too. So I know there's other ways that listeners can engage with you and this specific work that you're doing. Can you share with us where we all can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I have a podcast that's called Walking the Genetic Line. It's really beautiful. We just started in July of 2025, so we're new. But all we're doing is talking about the mental and emotional and relational impacts of navigating high hereditary cancer risk and what it means to have a genetic mutation. So come find us there and listen to Walking the Genetic Line. You can also come to my website, which is just sarahchampie, LCSW.com. I have a lot of resources on my website and information for people in this community. I'm also I'm not sure when this podcast is going to air, but there's a new cohort of my support groups that are starting for people in California. It's called Face the Risk Together. And we cap at 8 people, and it's a 10-week group. And we just walk through what it's like to carry a genetic mutation. Each week has a theme. And we talk about how, relationship to our bodies, how that's changing through this, relationship to parenting, fertility, decisions around parenting, medical advocacy. We just have a topic each week, and we just get to really hold and do a deep dive to be together around that. And then I love that it's a closed group over time, because it's so much more than these drop-in one-off groups. It's we really form beautiful relationships in that space. So the next cohort is starting in March, but there'll be more after that. And then I have an Instagram that's also Face the Risk Together, and I provide some information and, advertise the share the podcast there. And so, yeah, I'm really hoping to build more and more of a community and conversation around this as time goes by. And I would love to meet anyone that is touched by this and feels that they don't have a space in their lives that's holding this piece.
Thank you, Sarah. Gosh, this has been such an important conversation. And for me personally, again, just feeling so much appreciation for your willingness to do this work, because some are really touched so deeply and need this support. So thank you
so much. I'm so glad that it's resonating, and I'm so honored to be on Transforming Trauma, a podcast that I have listened to for so long. So full circle moment. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for joining us for today's episode. To find more information about our guest, check the show notes or visit us at complextraumatrainingcenter.com/transforming trauma. You can also connect with us in other ways. We are on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. As a mental health professional, your commitment to healing and growth inspires us. We at the Complex Trauma Training Center are committed to supporting you in your well-being and success. That's why we are honored to invite you to our Space Program 2026, an inner development program of support and self-discovery for therapists on the personal, interpersonal, and transpersonal levels. Running over 6 online sessions in 2026, this interactive experiential learning program is designed to support self-care and self-discovery for therapists exploring internally, relationally, and transpersonally. CTTC faculty will welcome you into a professional community of therapists that are seeking to create greater effectiveness and resilience in our professional lives. As CTTC faculty Brad Kammer says, the intent is that this program will help us not only become more effective therapists, but also love our work more. Please visit complextraumatrainingcenter.com and secure your spot in the 2026 Space Program. Thanks to Rig for producing and editing, to Tori Essex for our album art, and to Brad Kammer for the creation of this podcast. We look forward to building community and connection with you and changing the world by transforming trauma.